Hello, Warren here again with the Peach State Prime Transformers channel. And today, we're taking a break. I know we've had a lot of Cyber World reviews recently. Part of that is because Landon, again, it was his birthday, beginning of August, so he got all sorts of gifts and money, so he was able to get more, and he wanted to share them all with you guys. So hope you enjoyed those videos. But we're jumping back into Studio Series today, because I recently acquired Studio Series Cliffjumper. Now, of course, this is not the first version of Cliffjumper to hit the Studio Series line, but it is the most recent and makes use. It's a different mold from the previous release, and though it does make use of some existing tooling, so hope you'll join me as we take a look at Studio Series Cliffjumper. Alright, so Studio Series Cliffjumper. So Cliffjumper is, of course, on his packaging, it indicates he is from the Transformers the movie, or Transformers Le Film portion of Studio Series. Of course, he is one of the few original cast that survives the movie, and is a little bit more prominently featured than a lot of the 84-85 cast. So it does kind of make sense that, you know, he would be under that branding. Though, as we've seen with the upcoming Seeker multi-pack, the Storm pack, it is, they are, in fact, branching out into all portions of media, including the TV show. So Cliffjumper, I did not pick up the previous version that I mentioned before. However, I do think that this Cliffjumper does look pretty good. I like it. He does have his glass gun here, which, you know, a lot of Transformers come with guns and blasters, but, you know, few of them are iconic. You know, think about, like, Optimus Prime's gun and maybe blasters. And a few others out there, but one of the ones that has always stood out is Cliffjumper's. It's a glass gun. And no, it's not as big. It's not like his little rocket cannon that he had in the More Than Meets the Eye 3-parter that came with the previous Studio Series offering, but, you know, I think it works pretty well. And I'll touch on this a little bit more in the you know, when we get to the alt mode. But, you know, it's no secret that Cliffjumper is, of course, a retool of one of the later Bumblebee offerings. Or more recent Bumblebee offerings. And, you know, it's fitting because in G1 he was a partial off of the original Bumblebee toy, and he's always been roughly about the same size as, you know, a somewhat similar appearance, but there are differences, and kudos to Hasbro for not just making him a red Bumblebee, which, of course, we know Cliffjumper is much more than a red Bumblebee in both, you know, character, you know, and toy. Most notably, he is not a Volkswagen Beetle. He is a little red sports car. So, of course, you know, he does not have the Beetle feet. So those are new to Cliffjumper here. And then, of course, we do have the spoiler on the back. And it's not quite as rounded as a Volkswagen would be. Now, I do have several comparisons before we get to that Bumblebee that I mentioned. And the first thing I want to look at is a Cliffjumper to Cliffjumper. So, like I said, I didn't have the original Studio Series version of Cliffjumper, but I do have the Classics version. And this is primarily why. You know, I had stuck with this Classics version as my you know, ultimate version of Cliffjumper. And then in recent years, you know, I came to realize that I really wanted a Cliffjumper that was or not recent years, but earlier this year, that I wanted one that was, you know, a lot more akin to what we're used to seeing in G1. So I decided this Studio Series was, you know, it was upcoming, and I actually pre-ordered it from Pulse and just got it yesterday as of filming. And, you know, this Classics figure, you know, is what it, you know, did what it needed to do. However, it is very much a repaint, a red repaint of the Bumblebee from the Classics line. And one thing I neglected to mention, sorry for bumping the camera there, is Cliffjumper does in fact have a unique head sculpt. And while this mold is not a Volkswagen Beetle, you could tell that is a that's a Bumblebee head. Then of course, you know, it is a different alt mode, has these wings that are detachable. And, you know, it was a neat update, a unique take on Cliffjumper, but not really his original. One thing I will say is, as you probably all have noticed already, the Classics Cliffjumper towers over, you know, the Studio Series Cliffjumper, and I'm going to go more into that here in just a minute. But let's go ahead, we're going to take this Cliffjumper away. And before I do any more comparisons, just a few things. I really do like the Autobot, embossed Autobot symbol, or tamper-graphed Autobot symbol on the chest and hood. And again, that head sculpt is just dead on. That is indeed Cliffjumper. You know, I've heard some people who don't like this figure. Maybe certain body parts are painted differently than they should be compared to the animation model. I look at this and it just says Cliffjumper to me. The one thing that's not accurate, and again we'll see with Bumblebee also, is the backpack here, though I am willing to let that go. So let's compare him to another more recent figure, but let's stay with the mini car theme. So here's Gears that just came out not too long ago as part of the, I believe it was the Age of the Primes line, or End of Legacy. They're all running together now. It's all generations outside of Studio Series, and even that's kind of evolving into a Generations line of sorts. But anyway, so, you know, Gears and Cliffjumper, they look decent side by side. Again, both were originally mini cars. You know, they're roughly, I mean, Gears is a little taller than Cliffjumper, but, you know, Gears is also a much bulkier vehicle. More of like an all-terrain type explorer vehicle versus a little red sports car. So, you know, I think it works as far as scale is concerned. Now, this is where I'm going to talk about that a little bit, about these guys being so short. Actually, it's not. Let me show you my next comparison. And this is a very, very recent addition to Studio Series. This is the Target Exclusive More Than Meets the Eye collection Prowl that I did a video on not too long ago. Now, these are both deluxe figures. And you know what? Let's throw Gears in there too. So these are deluxe figures. They all cost roughly around $28 to $30 right now in the US. So, you know, we don't have a core or legend size class now that was, you know, between $10 and $12. I'm not saying that, you know, these mini cars, I'm even going to throw Gears in here because you can just see how much taller Prowl is by comparison, especially to Cliffjumper. And I've said this in a video before, I don't think we necessarily need to go back to having a core class, but I really feel that Hasbro should introduce a new smaller line, or smaller assortment outside of the deluxe price point, because I'll be honest, I don't really see much more engineering in either Gears or Cliffjumper as compared to Prowl here, who's much taller, much bulkier, much more figure. What I really think they need to do is go back and maybe release an assortment, maybe call it basic. You know, we had that back, going way back to Beast Wars. And yes, back then they were about $5. I'm not saying make them cheap. I'm not even saying make them $10. I think around $20 in today's market would be fair for a figure that's a little bit smaller than a deluxe, like your Cliffjumper or Gears here. And then, you know, unfortunately, we're seeing the trend where Our deluxes are continuing to go up in price, which is not good at all. You know, I've heard rumors that $30 is going to be the new entry point for MSRP. You know, we'll see if that happens. I'm hoping it doesn't. Some places already charge that much. But, look, you know, I'm happy I paid what I paid for Cliffjumper. I like the toy, and I think that's how a lot of people feel. However, when you see them on a shelf next to each other, you know, something as small as Cliffjumper, Gears squeaks by because he's like in between these two. But it's really hard sometimes on the wallet to say, I'm going to buy that one that's a little bit smaller versus this one that's a little bit bigger for $28. And this goes for any figures in this scale, not necessarily only these two. So, Hasbro, if you're listening, which I know you're probably not, I would really love to see a cheaper price point for characters like Cliffjumper. And again, you want to give us a big in box figure, throw Gears in there too. But, or Sea Spray, Beachcomber, you know, any of those mini cars. Heck, as I've created a whole video on this, do the throttle bots up in that scale. Make the $20 price point Transformers Basics, and then you jump to Deluxes. You know, maybe even if you had to go as far as $23. I think on the high side, $20 to $23 for the Basics assortment would be great. Now, I'd love to see everything cheaper than that. I'd love to see Deluxes back at $20. I thought they were expensive when they were $16, $17. But I understand that's probably not going to happen. So that's what I'd like to see. But that's enough about that. So, you know, I kept mentioning it already. But let's compare apples to apples here. Let's look at Bumblebee, Studio Series Bumblebee from Transformers the Movie versus Cliffjumper from Transformers the Movie. Now, they have released another Bumblebee. Imagine that. Since this one, that's more based on the Transformers Devastation video game design. This, of course, is really based on the animation design and a true Volkswagen Beetle now, or Volkswagen Bug, whatever you want to call it. You know, one thing that is interesting is, you know, again, there's been two VW Studio Series Generations designs that have come out. And this is the second one. Again, I prefer this one because it's the one I have. But, you know, so I'm not really comparing those. But I just want to call out kind of the design differences here. First thing that I think is kind of interesting, but I like it because it gives Cliffjumper more of his own identity here than, you know, after years of being labeled a red Bumblebee. If you look at the Autobot insignia on both of their chests, Cliffjumper's, you know, it's red on red, but it's also much larger than Bumblebee's. And you know what? I think that they pull it off accurately there. I think that's true to the characters. Bumblebee, you know, is always thought of as being the younger bot, the kid brother. Where Cliffjumper is kind of tiny but mighty. You know, very brash, kind of, you know, always out there jumping into action. So, you know, I think that little design cue really does a lot to their characterizations here. You look at the head sculpts. You can see they're both unique heads and faces to both characters, which, you know, is awesome. The blasters. They do both have unique blasters. At first, I was thinking it was the same, but you can tell those are totally different, albeit molded in the same shade of silver. Of course, the feet are different here, as they should be. And then you look at the back here, no spoiler on Bumblebee, but you do have it on Cliffjumper. And needless to say, both being, you know, sharing the same engineering. You know, they complement each other. They're the same height. They both have that backpack, which, you know, is debatable, but again, it really doesn't bother me all that much. But yeah, and of course, transformation's exactly the same on both of these. And why don't we go and take a look at those alt modes? All right, here we have Studio Series Cliffjumper in his sports car mode. Gotta say, I think it looks pretty good. Not a lot of complaints. I will say that, you know, this little bit of gray here from his arms, that hinge, you know, it does kind of stick out. But again, for being, you know, toyetic, you know, I think it's fine. He does have the, you know, when you fold the feet up, he does have a little Autobot symbol here as well, just like Bumblebee, and I'll show you that here in just a minute. I will say, again, I had Bumblebee, but it had been a while since I transformed him. The thing that really got me the first time transforming this Cliffjumper was how you fold the feet up to reveal these panels. And the instructions are not overly bad for this one, but it just wouldn't go. And so I even watched a video of someone transforming this figure, and they just did it. And I'm like, what kind of sorcery is this? And what I really think it was, because I haven't had trouble since that first time, is that the panels were just like extra stiff for some reason after it was first manufactured. So, you know, but since then it's been fine. One thing I do want to point out is that when you first get the figure, the spoiler is separate in the box. And but once you put it on, it tends to stay on, so no issues there. You know, as far as rolling, you know, he doesn't do too bad of a job. I mean, there's a lot worse today, so, you know, I will say that, you know, his arms are below. I thought those might drag, but no, not really. Almost rolled off the desk here. And then his gun, there is some weapon storage. You know, you can, these little pegs in the back here, just peg the side of the gun in there. One thing I think I would have liked maybe a little bit more was if there was some way to either mount it to where it pokes out the back, or you could mount it on top, maybe on the spoiler, just to, you know, because there was a couple, at least once, I swear it was in More Than Meets the Eye, where he did have a little gun pop out, and I think it was Laserbeak he was shooting at. So, you know, something like that would have been cool, but, you know, I could live without it too. Now, I do have some hot takes when this comparison comes up. So, Cliffjumper to Bumblebee. So I like this Bumblebee toy. I really do. I feel he does a great job representing Bumblebee on my shelf. And yes, I call him a Volkswagen Beetle because of the front. I know he's more square and boxy back here to really match his animation counterpart. And again, they both have that Autobot symbol. Again, Cliffjumper's is bigger and, you know, less filled in than Bumblebee's, you know, red on red. One thing that I found interesting when I was transforming these two is Cliffjumper, and this may be a hot take, I had a rougher time transforming Bumblebee, the pre-tool in this situation, than I did Cliffjumper. And, you know, if you look at Bumblebee, I feel like some of the gaps are a little bit bigger, especially here right at the door. And let's flip around the other side here. And see, that's bigger. And see, I fiddled with this, tried getting it to stay in there. And some parts just don't want to stay connected and tabbed in as well. You can tell right here at the back window. Cliffjumper just comes off looking a bit cleaner. Which, you know, I'm very shocked by that. And then if we even look at the hoods here, you know, you got some gappiness. It's not too bad here, but right here, where that little bit of curvature from the VW influence comes in, again, I think Cliffjumper pulls that off better for his sports car mode. It just flows better, looks more natural. And again, yeah, there's about the same there that you had on Bumblebee, which, so that's fine. But I dare say it, even though the alt modes are technically different types of cars, for this engineering and tooling, I think Cliffjumper might just pull it off a little bit better. The one exception being is Bumblebee, where this gray is on Cliffjumper. It is, it matches what it should on Bumblebee here. It's yellow and you have that little part of the window there. So I think Hasbro maybe could have painted that gray a little bit more. I don't know how that would have thrown off the bot mode, if at all that much. Of course, you can see the backs are different again. Spoiler, no spoiler, and no spoilers in this review. Ha ha ha. Anyways, and you have one piece of gun storage on Bumblebee, and you have two on Cliffjumper. And again, it just makes them both a little bit more unique and separate from each other. And again, you got these tail lights here on Bumblebee, and that's where the gun storage is on Cliffjumper here. And as far as rolling, they both roll probably about the same here. Let's see. Yeah. So not bad, for the little mini cars that are supposed to make a quick getaway and be spies and scouts and all that kind of all that. And again, I still really like this Bumblebee. It's just interesting, some of the differences and maybe even enhancements on the Cliffjumper version of it. All right, so wrapping up this review of Studio Series Cliffjumper. I've kind of already said it all. I think he's a great addition to my shelf, and he makes a great Cliffjumper, more so than the Classics one that I had filling in for him, even though that is a fun and unique toy, and it's still part of my collection. But as you've all seen, I've been reorganizing my shelves lately, and I'm kind of looking for that what I call the one, not kind of the ultimate representation of the character, as close as you can get in the TV show version. So that's kind of what I'm doing by year and by allegiance so far. You can go back and watch those videos. And again, some of you might prefer the first Studio Series Cliffjumper. Again, I missed out on that one. Just didn't get it when I had the chance. And so this is a good stand-in for me. And I think it's going to do well and kind of stand the test of time as far as my needs are concerned and wants. And he's the right size, albeit probably more expensive than I feel he should be. Again, shared all those thoughts already. And I think he looks just like Cliffjumper. Transformations fun and easy after that first time. So, I definitely give this figure a thumbs up, if I could fit my huge hand in the screen here. And, if you have a chance to pick him up and, have the funds available and need a Cliffjumper, I say, why not? Alright, so that is going to do it for this video of the Peach State Prime Transformers channel. If you did enjoy this video, which I hope you did, please give it a like here on YouTube. That definitely helps me out. And then, of course, you can leave a comment. What do you think of this Cliffjumper? Is this the one that you're putting in your collection? And again, G1's G1, but as far as updates to characters, how do you think this one fared? I'd love to hear from you. And, you feel free to share your thoughts on Bumblebee here as well. That came out before I had a channel. Anyways, and feel free to subscribe to the Peach State Prime Transformers channel as well, so that when I put up the latest videos, again, toy reviews, discussions of the latest news and reveals, which I don't feel we've had a few things here and there, not much that I felt needed covering. For instance, we have Missing Link Soundwave, which Soundwave was near perfect anyway, so I didn't feel the need to make a video. But when there's reveals of, you know, new waves of toys coming up, in general, or, you know, any entertainment news, you know, I'll cover that, share my thoughts with everybody. And then, of course, you know, anything else Transformers related that's fun to talk about. For instance, I also just did a video on Transformers the movie with 5 things that I feel should have been changed or maybe reconsidered when Hasbro was developing the movie with their partners back in 1984 through 6. You know, and a lot of people have watched that video, so apparently that was pretty interesting, so feel free to check that out if you haven't. Of course, you could also check out PeachStatePrime.com to learn more about me and my YouTube efforts. Outside of that, thank you very much for watching this video. Hope you have a great day, and God bless.